I'm Daniel Nelson of OneWorld, and I'm talking to Kumi Naidoo, International Executive Director of Greenpeace. He's the first African to head the group, which is fitting because he came to international notice first as an anti-apartheid campaigner in South Africa. He's led international campaigns to end poverty and protect human rights. He's marched for an end to violence against women and for the rights of Zimbabweans, and he's been to jail in Greenland for his environmental actions. So he's certainly not a one-issue campaigner. And Rio isn't a one-issue meeting. So, Kumi Naidoo, some banks are said to be too big to fail. Isn't Rio too big to succeed?
Well, we cannot address the current moment of world history, which is a perfect storm or a boiling point where we're seeing a convergence of range of different issues: financial crisis, poverty crisis, climate crisis, and so on, in isolation of each other. So therefore, it's appropriate that the frame of the Rio conference is broad and inclusive. However, I think that the reality is that the political will that is needed to actually move the planet in a clean, green future is sadly not aligned as we enter Rio. And right now, of course, a lot of people are speculating that we will not get the outcome that the world needs, the world deserves, and certainly our children and grandchildren's future critically, absolutely, imperatively needs us to do.
That raises the question of what we realistically can hope to get from Rio. Not what you would like, but what actually do you expect to come out of the meeting?
Well, firstly, I think there are certain issues where I think we can make positive progress. I believe that we can make progress on ocean protection because there is now a growing acceptance that our oceans are in extreme danger, with some predicting only 40 years before there's no fish in the sea. And given that sort of imperative, I think at a minimum we expect a clear set of actions that will move us to setting up marine protected reserves and so on. Secondly, I think elevating environmental governance to a much more higher level within the global approach to governance is probably something that will be agreed, which is the elevation of the United Nations Environment Programme as a much more central body within the UN system. And like that, there are fewer sort of areas where we might get progress. However, the more important thing is that Rio+20 must be used as an accountability moment. This is a time when governments, 20 years after they made the commitments of the original Earth Summit, need to be held accountable for what their performance has been. And one of the objectives of Rio must make it very, very clear that in 20 years, our governments have allowed the situation to get significantly more worse. And therefore, one of the outcomes of Rio, which might sound ironical to put it like this, has to be a recognition on the part of citizens and citizens' organizations around the world that in fact, they cannot put their faith in the negotiating system altogether. That in fact, we have to look at how we intensify our campaigning, our resistance, our efforts to ensure that irrespective of what the outcome of Rio is going to be, we have to know that our job is going to be to intensify everything that we are doing if we're going to stand any chance to ensure that we address the dehumanizing poverty that millions and millions of people live under on the one hand, but to do it in a way that is sustainable and deals with the realities of climate catastrophe and biodiversity loss and the overall environmental dangers that we are facing.
You yourself, I'm quoting here from an interview, said recently, for millions of people, especially in Africa, it is already too late. That was in connection with climate change. And we are losing the planet. Yet you remain optimistic, it was said in the same interview. How on earth can you remain optimistic in the face of such bleak outlook?
Well, you know, my late mother told me that it's much better to try and fail than fail to try. And we I have to recognize that while for significant numbers of people on this planet, people in small island states, people in coastal areas, people in parts of Africa that are being hit by climate-induced droughts and so on, that in fact it is too late to prevent catastrophe, and people have already paid the price. However, we are in a very, very narrow window of opportunity for when this crisis can move from affecting a section of the world's population to affecting the whole planet as a whole. So I think that we are at the moment now where we are between what is a climate crisis, which we are in already, and runaway catastrophic climate change, which is the few steps away. And whether we can prevent runaway catastrophic climate change, which in fact, to be honest, the science is not even fully clear of how devastating and drastic that would be, other than that it would be catastrophic. It means the challenge for us is to look at what we can protect on this planet for the future. Let's be honest, you know, at the moment, if you take forest protection, every 2 seconds, a forest the size of a football field is disappearing as we speak. If you look at oceans, the triple whammy of overfishing, ocean acidification because of climate impact, and particularly excess carbon in the atmosphere, and toxic dumping and oil spills and so on, all of these things are leading to a situation where our oceans could be dead in 40 years. So right now, yes, people have suffered, people have lost their lives, and that is bad, and it's a reflection of bad political leadership. However, we can still protect the majority of people on this planet if we act with urgency and political will in the coming months and years.
And you've mentioned catastrophic climate change, but do you think there's a danger that that issue is detracting attention from other issues such as biodiversity or ocean protection?
Well, increasingly, I think the climate question has become the cross-cutting, overarching issue in a way, because there are quite strong connections between the two. I think we have to make sure that we are treating issues of forests, oceans, biodiversity in its broadest sense, as well as dealing with climate and energy issues in a focused way, but while recognizing that climate actually cuts across it. So, for example, if you take ocean acidification, which is a problem as a result of excess carbon emissions, is obviously connected to climate change. If we take the destruction of biodiversity in our forests, we know that the destruction of forests is reducing our ability to capture carbon and mitigate the impacts of carbon emissions. So we have to, I think, certainly I wouldn't support putting all our focus on looking at climate in a narrow way. We need to look at all of these different issues, look at where they are intersecting and deal with them in an intersectoral way, and where they are distinct and unique and separate with requiring separate interventions, then we need to do those as at the same time. As you know, some people say, we have to have a political will and a political leadership that is able to walk and chew gum at the same time. We cannot make choices that say we will do one and not do the other, when in fact they are fundamentally interrelated and connected.
Okay, finally, before we leave you to go off and walk and chew gum at the same time, while saving the world, I hope, what is Greenpeace's priority in the next 5 years, given this huge range of issues and problems and possibilities for campaigning? Where is your emphasis going to be?
Well, firstly, it's being extremely publicly and in everything we do committed to working in alliance with the broadest section of civil society, meaning working more effectively with trade unions, with religious leaders, with social movements, with indigenous peoples, and so on, because we all must recognize that we cannot win this if we do not get better at working in the broadest based alliances and finding the way in which we can actually maximize the voices of citizens to make it impossible for government and business to ignore our appeals. Secondly, we have to begin to mobilize much larger numbers of people to to participate directly in all that we do. So one of our biggest focus moving forward is intensifying people participation in the activities and activism of Greenpeace, because sadly governments only act when they can see that there is a visible majority of citizens pushing them to actually take a particular step forward in hopefully a sustainable direction. Thirdly, we have to recognize that civil disobedience has to be intensified, and Greenpeace will be intensifying our efforts at civil disobedience, which we have always been engaged in, but we are going to take it to a much higher level. Greenpeace will also focus on solutions work. For example, our energy revolution scenario, which has been designed in partnership with a range of other institutions, shows how we, by 2050, can reduce our dependence on carbon, move in a direction of a clean, green, clean economy that does two things: that reduces our emissions and averts catastrophic climate change, but at the same time also is done in a smart way that generates millions of decent new jobs in the green economy. We think that it's important that we break the lie that governments and certain interests in the business community sometimes push, where they say that, we don't have alternatives but to stick on to the way that we're doing it in the past. And the way that we're doing it in the past, in terms of a socio-economic paradigm, is one that has bred inequality, brought us to the brink of unsustainability, it's brought us to this climate crisis, and still as a world that is completely out of balance, where millions of people do not have basic human rights by not having clean water, sanitation, homes, and so on. And bear in mind, 1.6 billion people in the world continue to be living in complete energy poverty. So we are going to focus on that. And the last thing we will continue to do is more strongly make the link between environmental justice, social justice, and economic justice, because we feel that for far too long, these different agendas have been kept apart, and we need to bring them together so that we can actually find the most creative and most powerful solutions moving forward, so that we can secure this planet's future for our children and grandchildren. Thank you.
Kumi Naidoo of Greenpeace, thank you so much.
Thank you.